So, you know, last season, 49ers carried 5 running backs, including Juszczyk. And, I see no indication why they wouldn't do the same thing. Obviously, they drafted a running back in TDP in the 3rd round. But the thing that was interesting to me is, I'm a big fan of Trey Sermon. He was obviously drafted in the 3rd round last season, showed some flashes, however, was injured, got injured very early on when he did get opportunity to play. Um, was in the doghouse, it seemed like, with Kyle Shanahan earlier in the season. And it was really nice to see Kyle Shanahan speak about the running backs in the way that he did, because he only mentioned 3. He mentioned how, obviously Elijah Mitchell being Elijah Mitchell. He mentioned TDP being the guy that they brought in. And then he also mentioned Trey Sermon, talking about that he came back working on the things that he needed to work on. And kind of, if you read between the lines, which is, if you understand Shanahan language, right, looks like that they're going to give him an opportunity, which is very, very interesting for me, because that was somebody that some people thought might be a guy that doesn't even make the roster. So I was excited to see that, because I am a big Trey Sermon fan. Before I move on, 49ers throwback, my dude Fernando. Hey, Sunil, what's up, my guy? Thank you so much for joining in. So let's talk about who the 5 running backs will be. So clearly Elijah Mitchell is going to be in there. TDP, you would assume, is going to be in there because he was just drafted. And then from what Kyle Shanahan's saying, Trey Sermon looks like he's going to be a guy that makes the roster. And obviously you got Kyle Juszczyk there, right? So that's the 4. 4 out of the 5, I assume, are going to be those guys. So who's the 5th, right? Who is the 5th? Now, I put this out on Twitter, and thank you to all you Twitter folk for leaving your answers and being really interactive there. It seemed like the overwhelming majority believe that the 5th man is going to be Jeff Wilson Jr. And I can't be mad at that. I think that probably is the most likely situation because of Jeff Wilson Jr.'s leadership. He's been with the team before. He obviously was on the team last year. 2 years ago, he played extremely well, right? Last year, coming off of an injury, didn't show that same explosion, but it is somebody who Kyle Shanahan trusts, and he does like going with guys that he trusts. So Jeff Wilson Jr. seems like a guy that could definitely make that round out as the 4th running back and the 5th man on the roster from that running back fullback room. Now, let's play devil's advocate a little bit, because here's the thing, right? When the 49ers had their most success in the rushing game was 2019. 2019, they finished 2nd in rushing. I think they averaged around 140 yards per game. And that running back room consisted of Coleman, Breida, and Mostert as the 3-headed monster, right? So you had Coleman, who was an in-between-the-tackles type player, workhorse, not necessarily the track speed, explosion on the sweeps and things of that nature. More your downhill runner, power back type of mentality. And then you had the change of pace guys in Breida and Mostert, who were able to give you those home run type explosive runs. And it boded really, really well. That rushing attack, we saw, especially in the playoff game against Green Bay, carried the team, where they didn't even need Jimmy to throw the ball more than 8 times in that game and still were able to dominate a very good Green Bay team. So that rushing attack had like a different style of running backs. Now, if we are saying that the running back room is going to be Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, TDP, and Jeff Wilson Jr., all of these guys are built similarly. All of these guys are between the tackle type runners, and all of these guys are not necessarily known for their breakaway speed. So if we're thinking that, if this ends up being the room, it would be the first time that the 49ers really went into the season without having that electric speed, right? So knowing that, okay, Trey Sermon, TDP, and a guy like Elijah Mitchell are already there, right? Young, healthy guys that can do the things that, Jeff Wilson Jr. can do as well. Do they give a guy like Jordan Mason, who a lot of reporters have been saying is doing really well this offseason, that's showing that electrifying speed? Does a guy like Jordan Mason actually make the running back room? And can he be that fifth back that actually makes it? So they do have that option to go with speed if Kyle Shanahan needs that. That's interesting, right? I did see a few people say that Jordan Mason might be that guy. To me, it kind of so the three backs that you think it's going to be between is Jeff Wilson Jr., JaMycal Hasty, and Jordan Wilson. I think that Hasty is probably going to be the odd man out. I don't really see a path to him being able to make the 53-man roster. 916 49er, thank you for joining in. Mason is going to be it, I believe. I can't be mad at you, man, because I definitely think that it is important for the 49ers to have a different option there as far as speed, right? And even though I respect Jeff Wilson Jr. a lot, he got the opportunity last year to have a lot of carries and be able to really kind of earn another position or become that bona fide second back behind Elijah Mitchell, but he didn't take it, right? It seemed like he was a step behind where he was, the previous season. It could be that he came off of a debilitating injury. Could be, that maybe now another year he's going to be able to show that explosion. But what if he doesn't have that explosion anymore? What's the value of having Jeff Wilson Jr. there when you already have three guys that kind of are built the same way in Mitchell, TDP, and Trey Sermon? That could be the argument as to why a guy like Jordan Mason ends up making it. I don't know. I personally, obviously, there's not much you can really decipher from notepads and no tackling and all that kind of stuff. These are all questions that will be answered when we actually get into training camp. But it is interesting to speculate. For me, I do think a guy like Jordan Mason could be that guy that makes it into there. Now, another thing to pay attention to is obviously there's a brand new mind there when it comes to the running backs and Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn is a coach who, as a coordinator and a head coach, have been able to work with very similar running backs and still have a lot of success no matter where he went. Most recently, I should say, he was there with the Detroit Lions and, had Swift and I think it's Williams over there, or the guy that used to play for Green Bay. But their rushing attack was pretty formidable, even though they didn't have necessarily the talent on the offensive line and all that kind of stuff. Anthony Lynn is just able to, create very, very effective running backs and running game. And maybe he's more interested in the big backs, right? Which is why maybe a Jeff Wilson Jr. Makes it. But he's also somebody who's mentioned Jordan Mason this offseason, saying that the kid's playing very, very well. So if he's on Anthony Lynn's radar, maybe that does, that is a sign that Jordan Mason might be that guy. I don't know. What do you guys think? Would you be okay with the running back room that consists of Elijah Mitchell, TDP, Trey Sermon, Juszczyk, and then Jordan Mason? To me, I think that would actually be a very good rushing attack. I think that obviously Elijah Mitchell is going to be RB1, but I would like him to not have to carry as much of a load as he did last season, because clearly he got injured, missed 6 games, and still carried the ball quite a lot, right? So if guys like Trey Sermon, if guys like TDP can get, some carries here and there to limit what Elijah Mitchell actually is doing throughout the season, then you would have a fresher Elijah Mitchell moving forward to make the deep playoff run and hopefully, a Super Bowl run, right? So that's kind of how I see it. Some of the major things that I want to see out of this running back room is the ability to average more than 4.5 yards per carry, right? We saw Elijah Mitchell do it. He averaged around 4.6, 4.7 yards per carry. However, even in very limited playing time, Trey Sermon averaged like 4.1 yards per carry. And I think Jeff Wilson Jr., Hasty, and them average even less. So I would love to see the running back room be able to average over 4.5 yards per carry. Why I think that's going to be important, because then it takes away the pressure to get the wide receivers into the running game, like Debo, like Ray McCloud, maybe even Danny Gray. I would like to see these guys not necessarily have to be utilized in the running game as much, because the running backs aren't doing their job. If the running backs can just make sure that they're able to, average that over 4.5 yards, then you could have the running backs maybe come in just for change of pace if they're in the rushing attack, but more than likely just utilize them in the passing game. Question, Sunil, do you think our running style will change with Anthony Lynn? I do think that the running backs are going to be utilized in the pass game a lot more, because you have seen that from Anthony Lynn more than, in previous running back coordinators for the 49ers. But it's still going to be the zone scheme. I do believe that just based off of the personnel right now, that you are going to see more interior runs than the sweeps on the outside. And the reason for that is, like I said, they don't have that breakaway speed. So maybe, like you mentioned, if Jordan Mason makes it, that'll utilize all aspects of the zone versus just the interior. But overall, I still think we're going to see a very productive running back room with Anthony Lynn there. But I do think you're going to see them more in the passing game and, more power running style, just because of more than Anthony Lynn being there, the personnel that it seems that they have, right? Because you talk about Trey Sermon, Elijah Mitchell, and TDP. These are all, pretty big backs as far as size, weight, and, like I said, more known for power versus speed. So, yeah, that's what I think as far as who is going to make it. I think it's going to come down to Jeff Wilson Jr. and Jordan Mason. My guess right now would actually be Jordan Mason, just because it gives them a little bit more speed that they aren't necessarily seeing from the rest of the running backs in the room.